"You're trespassing, Karen," I said through the intercom. "Please get off my flamingo floaty." She blinked, startled, mid-sip of my last root beer, still bobbing in my pool like she owned the place. One of her poodles yapped and peed directly into the water. I watched the live footage on my phone, speechless. She didn't even know I was watching her, yet. At that moment, something inside me snapped. Not in the violent kind of way. No, I'm not that guy. But the part of me that had tried to be neighborly, civil, tolerant, that part just packed up and left. Because this wasn't the first time Karen had crossed the line. This was the culmination. The tipping point. The "you just activated my trap card" moment. What she didn't know was that I built this pool myself. Every wire, every sensor, every automation. It was more than just a pool. It was bait. And Karen had just cannonballed into the smartest revenge system this HOA had ever seen. 3 months earlier, I moved into my dream home. After 2 decades of working soul-draining hours as an electrical engineer for a company that thought break rooms were a luxury, I finally had the savings to build something for myself. A modern home on a 1/4-acre lot, backed by a lush hillside and fronted by a quiet cul-de-sac. There was only one catch. The place was in an HOA-governed community. At the time, I didn't think much of it. The fees were low, the neighborhood looked clean and peaceful, and the real estate agent promised, "This HOA is mostly hands-off." I had no idea that hands-off would soon be replaced by the iron-fisted grip of a woman named Karen McDavenport. Yes, McDavenport. The kind of name that already screams patio, wine rage, and embroidered towels labeled "Live Laugh Love." She moved in 2 weeks after I did, diagonally across from me, into a slightly smaller home that she immediately began modifying with plastic garden flamingos, LED gnomes, and a sign on her door that read, "HOA is life." The first time she introduced herself, it was less of a conversation and more of a declaration. She strutted over as I was unloading solar panels from my truck and said, "I hope you got pre-approval for all that. The HOA frowns on unsanctioned installations. No hello, no welcome to the neighborhood. Just pure, uncut Karen." I explained, calmly, that the panels were well within regulation and had already been approved by the HOA board. Her eyes narrowed like I'd just challenged her authority in her own home. From that moment forward, she made it her mission to monitor everything I did. If I watered my grass at 10:01 a.m. on a water restriction day, I'd get a warning slip. If my trash bins were out 2 minutes past pickup time, there'd be a passive-aggressive note. One time she even complained that my porch light was too blue and offended her seasonal decorations. But I kept my cool. I figured, like most HOA zealots, she'd get bored or find a new target. I stayed polite, civil, even smiled and waved. I didn't give her anything to latch onto. That was until the pool was finished. Now, this wasn't just any pool. I'd saved extra just to build it right. Heated saltwater, custom LED lighting, an energy-efficient filtration system, and, because I couldn't help myself, a full smart integration powered by a system I built from scratch. Cameras, pressure sensors, perimeter alerts, even AI-assisted voice control. I called it Aqua Sentinel, mostly as a joke. But that joke would soon become the reason Karen never swam in peace again. From the second it was installed, Karen's obsession intensified. She asked pointed questions about whether I had filed the necessary communal water impact report. She peered over my fence with opera binoculars. She told other neighbors that my pool was unauthorized luxury and causing moral decline on the block. I brushed it off. But then she started bringing her son around. Her kid, maybe 15, had this habit of chucking tennis balls into my backyard, then hopping the fence to retrieve them. One day I caught him trying to open the pool gate while holding a GoPro. When I confronted him, he muttered something about cool content and ran off. I told Karen to keep him off my property. She rolled her eyes and said, "Maybe if you weren't flaunting your aquatic privilege, this wouldn't be a problem." I was still trying to decide if aquatic privilege was an actual thing when it happened. One sunny Saturday, I was working a weekend shift at the lab. My phone buzzed with a motion alert. I opened the app and stared, dumbfounded. There she was, Karen, in my pool, wearing a garish leopard print one-piece, sipping my soda, and floating on my flamingo raft. Her son was recording her with his phone, egging her on. "Say it again, Mom," he shouted. Karen raised her drink and yelled, "Welcome to our pool, citizens." My jaw dropped, and then her dogs came into view. Two tiny poodles, both wearing doggy floaties. One leapt in and immediately pooped in the water. The other began biting at the pool jet. I watched, in stunned silence, as my private oasis was transformed into her personal splash zone. She even had the gall to pull out her Bluetooth speaker and blast old Celine Dion hits like it was some kind of midlife crisis pool party. I almost dropped my phone. That was the moment. The moment everything changed. I didn't call the police. I didn't yell or send a cease and desist. No, I started planning. I began designing an experience Karen would never forget. Because she thought this was just a pool. She didn't realize she had just violated the most high-tech backyard system ever installed by a petty, overworked engineer with a grudge. I reprogrammed Aqua Sentinel that night. I wrote new voice commands. I adjusted the sensor response triggers. I added a Karen protocol. I made a plan. One that would embarrass her, scare her, and ensure she never stepped foot near my property again. Because when someone steals your soda, pees in your pool, and declares it community property, you don't just forgive. You engineer justice. And oh boy, was it going to be electrifying. It took me less than 24 hours to create the first version of the Karen protocol. That night, I stayed up with nothing but energy drinks, my cat watching suspiciously from the windowsill, and a growing playlist of motivational revenge songs blasting through my Bluetooth speakers. If you've never programmed motion-sensitive pool sensors while listening to Eye of the Tiger on loop, I highly recommend it. There's something about the combination of wires, caffeine, and righteous fury that really gets the creative juices flowing. By sunrise, Aqua Sentinel was no longer just a pool management system. It had evolved. It was now a fully armed, sound-reactive, pressure-sensing fortress, ready to deploy non-lethal but highly humiliating countermeasures for any unwanted guest, especially ones named Karen. First came the lights. I rewired the LED strips to respond not only to normal settings like evening chill and party mode, but to a new set of trigger phrases and sensor input. If someone stepped into the water uninvited, the lights would flicker blood red, strobe erratically, and pulse to the beat of whatever audio the speakers decided to pump out. Speaking of which, the speakers, previously reserved for relaxing playlists, were now connected to a hidden library of audio files I curated for this exact moment. From emergency sirens to ominous cinematic booms to classic horror movie soundtracks, it was a buffet of panic-inducing sound design. Then came the voice. I recorded several lines using my smart home assistant's custom mode. Nothing says, "Get out of my pool," like a calm, robotic voice telling you that you violated subsection C of the neighborhood trespassing ordinance while the Jaws theme plays softly underneath. I even gave the assistant a sarcastic edge. One line went, "Congratulations. You've earned today's Unauthorized Swimmer of the Month award. Please collect your prize. Immediate ejection." It was over the top, sure, but so was breaking into someone else's yard and treating it like a public spa. Finally, I fine-tuned the electric feedback system. Now, before anyone calls the cops on me, let me be clear. I wasn't installing anything dangerous. The electric system was similar to the small shock you get when touching a metal doorknob after walking across carpet in socks. Just enough to surprise someone. I rigged it into the handrails and a few deck chairs near the pool. Only activated when the Karen protocol was triggered, it would deliver a harmless but memorable zap designed to startle, not injure. The kind of jolt that makes someone leap back and question all their life decisions. With everything in place, I waited. Patiently. I watered my lawn with extra flair, knowing full well Karen was watching from behind her blinds, notebook in hand. I left my gate unlocked one afternoon and, accidentally, left a floaty out, casually tossed in the middle of the pool. Like a spider leaving a fly-shaped invitation on its web. I knew she wouldn't be able to resist for long. And sure enough, the very next weekend, Karen made her move. I was parked down the street, watching the feed from my phone like it was the season finale of a prestige drama. Karen strutted up the driveway with her son, both wearing swim gear like this was Club Med. She had sunglasses perched on her head, and carried one of those giant insulated tumblers that probably contained some horrifying mix of wine and citrus Gatorade. Her bratty teen filmed the whole thing on his phone, cackling as they opened the gate and sauntered toward the pool. I could practically hear the Mission Impossible theme in my head. She didn't even hesitate. Shoes off, towel down, leap into the water. Her son followed, landing like a cannonball and immediately splashing half the pool onto my deck chairs. One of the poodles barked and circled the edge of the pool, clearly traumatized by the disco ball chaos that was about to unfold. The moment Karen's body hit the water, the pressure sensors activated. Instantly, the pool lights snapped from calm blue to seething red. Sirens blared from the speakers, followed by my smart assistant's voice, smooth as silk. Unauthorized entry detected. Initiating defensive protocol in 5-4. Karen froze mid-float. Her son shouted something, but it was drowned out by the sound of a thunderclap from the outdoor subwoofers. The speakers transitioned to the soundtrack of a war movie, complete with helicopters and explosions. The deck lights flickered in sync. The pool jets reversed direction, shooting upward like miniature geysers. 3, 2, 1. The shock rails activated. Karen grabbed the side of the pool to steady herself, and immediately shrieked, flailing backward into the water like she'd just been tossed. Her son tripped over the lounge chair and landed flat on his back. One of the poodles slipped on the wet concrete and belly flopped straight into the chaos. The voice returned, this time with theatrical menace. Congratulations, Karen. You have officially overstayed your welcome. Please evacuate the premises before the automated drones arrive. Now, obviously, there were no drones. But Karen didn't know that. She screamed something about calling the police while scrambling out of the water, dripping wet and dragging a soaked dog behind her. Her son abandoned his flip-flops and sprinted out the gate barefoot. Karen followed, slipping on her way out and crashing into one of my garden gnomes with a sound that was somewhere between a wail and a curse. They didn't even bother to close the gate. I waited until they were well off my property before ending the protocol. The system shut down, returning the pool to its peaceful, undisturbed glow. A notification popped up on my phone. Unauthorized entry repelled. Intruders fled. I cracked open a soda and toasted the screen. The aftermath was delicious. That same night, the kid uploaded footage of the incident to his social media. He tried to make it seem like they were victims of a psycho neighbor with booby traps, but the internet was not on their side. Within hours, the video went viral. Comments ranged from, "Karen got what she deserved," to "This man is a legend," to "Where can I buy this system?" I didn't have to lift a finger. The HOA called an emergency meeting the following week after receiving dozens of complaints, from other residents, not me. Karen, soaked and furious, marched into that meeting with a printed stack of demands, claiming that I had violated community safety regulations and weaponized my home. But the board had already seen the footage. One of them even asked for a copy of the smart system layout. Another laughed when Karen tried to claim she thought the pool was communal. The board's decision? No fines for me. No warnings. But Karen? She got an official citation for trespassing, and the HOA president warned her that any future incidents would result in legal action. She stormed out of the meeting, muttering something about conspiracies and surveillance state. I almost felt bad. Almost. Back home, I tweaked the Karen protocol. Just a little. Added some new sounds. upgraded the lighting patterns. I had a feeling she wasn't done yet. And neither was I. The silence didn't last long. For about 3 glorious days, it seemed like the Karen protocol had worked permanently. No mysterious footprints by the pool. No barking poodles in my flowerbeds. No unsolicited observations about the angle of my lawnmower lines. It was peaceful. Too peaceful. Like that eerie calm in a horror movie right before the evil spirit comes back with backup and a vengeance. And sure enough, on day 4, I noticed something different on the neighborhood bulletin board near the mailbox cluster. A laminated flyer with bright red letters read, "Vote Karen McDavenport for HOA interim chair, a voice for order, fairness, and community control." My first reaction was to laugh. Out loud. In public. But then I looked around and saw a few neighbors actually reading the flyer seriously, nodding. That was the moment I realized Karen hadn't given up. She was regrouping. Rebranding. Strategically turning her humiliation into a political platform, like some kind of reality show villain entering the second season with a redemption arc. She didn't just want revenge anymore. She wanted power. And unfortunately, in HOA world, all it took was a few board members and a technicality. Within a week, she'd managed to weasel her way into a temporary position on the HOA board. One of the original members had taken a sudden leave of absence due to personal stress, and Karen, naturally, offered to fill in. Of course, she framed it as a selfless act to restore order after a neighborhood safety incident, conveniently leaving out the part where she was the trespasser who tried to turn my pool into a poodle spa. The first order of business she introduced? A new bylaw draft titled, Community Amenities and Shared Resources Policy. It sounded harmless, even helpful, until I read the fine print. It essentially declared that any feature visible from the street or adjoining lots could be considered a visual community resource, subject to communal regulation. That included decorations, solar panels, exterior paint schemes, and yes, private pools. I laughed again. This time bitterly. To make it worse, a new sign appeared near the entrance of my cul-de-sac a few days later. It was small but professionally printed. Designated HOA Relaxation Zone, Respect Community Use. It pointed vaguely in the direction of my property. I tore it down. The next day, 2 more went up, one zip-tied to my mailbox and another stapled to the neighborhood park bulletin board. Then came the citations. First, I got a warning for gate height deviation, which was absurd since my gate hadn't changed an inch since the day I installed it. Then a notice about excessive lighting brightness affecting adjacent residents. This one referenced my pool lights, which were, in fact, lower lumens than the street lamps. I appealed both. They were denied. I knew Karen was behind it, pulling strings like some HOA puppeteer. And as her influence grew, so did the pressure on anyone who had supported me. My neighbor Nancy, who once complimented my lawn stripes, got slapped with a violation for unauthorized bird feeders. A retired couple across the street received a demand to repaint their perfectly fine shutters. Karen was making an example of everyone, trying to isolate me, cut off any support, and prove she could do whatever she wanted now that she wore the shiny little title of interim chair. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't alone. Enter Linda. Linda lived next door to me and had kept her distance during most of the drama, usually sipping iced tea from her porch swing with a look that said she'd seen it all before. Turns out she had. Linda was a retired corporate attorney who'd once served as the president of the HOA before stepping down after a heated dispute over holiday decoration restrictions. She had no love for HOA politics, but she had something far better: receipt. When I told her about Karen's power grab and the new rule about visual community resources, she snorted so hard her cat jumped off her lap. Then she marched into her garage and returned with 2 fat binders labeled HOA Legal Archives 2012 to 2021. Apparently, Linda kept everything. She flipped to a section with highlighted text and said, She didn't file the right documentation to authorize the bylaw change. She skipped the resident vote. This whole thing is illegal. That was music to my ears. We got to work. I pulled every screenshot, video, and email I had. Linda drafted letters and filed formal complaints. We requested meeting transcripts and forced a special review of Karen's appointment process. At first, the board dragged their feet, clearly under Karen's thumb, or maybe just afraid of her vendetta-fueled clipboard. But the tide began to turn when one of the board members, a soft-spoken guy named Marty who ran a home security business, reached out to me quietly and said, she offered me a $50 gift card to vote in her favor. Also promised I'd get priority on the new guest parking rule she's pushing. That was the golden ticket. With Marty's statement, Linda called for an emergency audit of the board's recent decisions. Karen tried to fight it, calling it a personal attack and accusing me of running a techno-surveillance cult. But Linda knew the bylaws better than Karen ever would. During the meeting, she calmly listed out every violation, procedural error, and conflict of interest Karen had committed in the past month. Then, without missing a beat, she played a clip from Karen's own son's viral video, Karen floating in my pool, cackling and yelling, "I don't care if it's his property, I own this neighborhood." You could hear a pin drop. Then someone laughed. Then more people joined in. Even Marty chuckled. Karen's face turned the color of a ripe tomato. The board voted to suspend her position pending further review. They also overturned several of the citations issued in the past 2 weeks, including mine. Karen stood up, red-faced and stammering, and yelled something about personal vendettas and outsider infiltration before storming out of the meeting. That night, I stood on my back deck with Linda, sipping drinks as the sun set behind the hills. The pool glowed gently, Alexa softly playing Sinatra in the background. It felt like peace. For now. But I knew Karen wasn't done. People like her don't just walk away quietly. They regroup, plot, and come back even more desperate. And I could already feel it in the air. She was planning something reckless. Something bigger. Something stupid. Good. Let her try. Because if she thought the Karen protocol was wild, she hadn't seen anything yet. It happened on a Thursday. I remember because it was garbage day, and I had just wheeled my bins out to the curb when I noticed the gate to my backyard was ajar. That was strange. I always locked it. Habitually even. My first instinct was that it had been the wind, until I saw the muddy footprints on the concrete leading straight to the pool deck. My stomach dropped. I rushed around back, heart pounding, only to be greeted by the unmistakable scent of something foul. Dog poop. Not just in the grass or near the planter. It was in the pool, floating like an unwelcome party guest in my once pristine oasis. The water was cloudy, the jets had been turned off, and the flamingo floaty had been slashed down the middle and left half deflated like a beached sea creature. I stood there in disbelief, trying to make sense of the chaos. Then I noticed the spray paint. Someone had tagged the side of my fence with giant red letters, HOA forever. The A was crooked, and the can had clearly run out halfway through the second E, but the message was loud and clear. Karen. No one else would be that bold, that petty, and that proud of being part of an organization that fined people for having 2 garden gnomes instead of 1. She had broken in. Not just trespassed, broken in. She had crossed every line, torn up every boundary, and left a steaming pile of metaphorical and literal crap in her wake. I ran back to the house and pulled up the footage. The cameras had caught everything, as I knew they would. She'd used a key. Not her own, obviously. It was the HOA master key, one that was meant for emergency maintenance access only. I watched in shock and morbid fascination as Karen strutted through my gate like she was entering a resort suite, wearing one of those floppy sun hats and dragging a can of spray paint in one hand while the poodles yapped behind her. She didn't even check to see if anyone was watching. She wasn't afraid. She thought she was untouchable. She let her dogs roam the yard, then approached the camera nearest the pool and gave it a middle finger. The footage caught every detail. Her voice, loud and crystal clear. "Let's see you find me for once, genius." Then she spray-painted the fence, kicked over a deck chair, and walked away like a movie villain in slow motion. By the time I'd finished watching, I wasn't even angry. I was focused, calculated, a little bit impressed, honestly, by her audacity. But mostly, I was done. This wasn't about a pool anymore. This wasn't about flamingo floaties or smart lights or prank revenge. This was personal. She had broken into my sanctuary, destroyed my property, and left her twisted signature behind like she was proud of it. That was the final straw. I called Linda immediately. She came over with her binder in one hand and a thermos of something suspiciously strong-smelling in the other. We watched the footage together. She didn't even flinch when Karen flipped off the camera. Just nodded and said, "That's breaking and entering, criminal mischief, destruction of private property, and misuse of official access. I hope she has a good lawyer." I wasn't worried about Karen having a good lawyer. I was worried about the fallout. Because once this went public, there would be no putting the genie back in the bottle. Karen was going to war. But this time, she'd picked a fight with the wrong nerd. Linda sent the footage to the HOA president and the local sheriff's office. Within hours, the board called an emergency session. Karen didn't even try to deny it. She marched into the meeting wearing a blinding magenta tracksuit and accused me of fabricating the footage. Claimed I'd used AI to make it look like she was the one in the video. She stood there, red-faced and ranting about deepfakes and conspiracies while the footage played on a loop behind her. At one point, her own voice echoed from the speakers. "Let's see you find me for once, genius." She tried to cover her ears like a child refusing to hear a bedtime story. The sheriff's deputy attending the meeting didn't laugh. He took note, quietly, professionally, and then, when it was over, he walked right over to Karen and asked her to come with him. The room was silent except for the clack of her rhinestone sandals as she huffed and puffed her way out of the meeting hall with her lawyer, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I thought that was the end of it, but Karen never does things halfway. That night, she posted a ranting video online, claiming she was the victim of a neighborhood-wide smear campaign, and that I had weaponized technology to terrorize innocent residents. The video had over 10,000 views by morning, mostly people mocking her, but a few fringe supporters started echoing her nonsense. Karen had gone full HOA martyr. It didn't work. The charges stuck. The HOA suspended her membership indefinitely and filed their own civil claim for abusing her board position and stealing the master key. Turns out she'd used that key more than once. There were complaints from at least 3 other residents about missing packages, gate tampering, and mysteriously inspected backyard sheds. The sheriff confirmed it was part of an ongoing investigation. Karen was facing multiple counts of trespassing, vandalism, and property damage. Then something remarkable happened. People started talking. Neighbors who had been silent for months suddenly found their voices. Stories came pouring out. Karen stealing Halloween candy decorations from a widow's porch, Karen threatening to fine a teenage girl for roller skating on the sidewalk, Karen standing in someone's driveway and yelling at their lawn for being too smug. It was like the whole neighborhood had been under a Karen-shaped cloud, and now, finally, the sun had come out. The board officially voted to ban her from all HOA leadership roles. Her fines stacked up into the thousands. Her house went up for sale within a month. She tried to frame it as a planned relocation to a more enlightened neighborhood, but no one bought it. Not when the realtor quietly confessed she'd received more complaints in a single week than she'd had in her entire career. The day she moved out, a few neighbors gathered near the curb with lawn chairs and drink. No one cheered. No one jeered. We just watched, silently, as the moving van pulled away and the pink garden flamingos were packed into the back of a trailer. I swear one of them fell over like it was giving up on life. Her poodles barked from the window as the SUV disappeared down the street. And just like that, she was gone. Well, almost gone. Because when someone like Karen goes down, she never leaves quietly. She leaves a trail, a stain, a broken floaty, and a fence that still smelled faintly of cheap spray paint. But I wasn't mad anymore. I was relieved. She was finally out of my life, out of our neighborhood, and out of power. And I had plans. Big ones. Plans that involved community, celebration, and a little surprise I'd been saving for just the right moment. Because as much as this whole thing started with revenge, it was about to end with something far sweeter. It started with a flyer, simple and glossy, slipped into every mailbox on the block. It had no HOA logo, no official font, just a colorful image of pool floaties, burgers on a grill, and a huge headline: Karen Free Barbecue Bash, this Saturday, hosted by the homeowner formerly known as Target Number 1. The RSVP count started with a few neighbors, but by the end of the week, it had exploded. People I barely knew, people who had barely said more than a polite nod for the past year, were suddenly emailing, texting, even dropping by with side dish offers and folding chairs. It was like the entire neighborhood had just taken a deep breath for the first time and realized, hey, maybe we can be a community without someone measuring our grass with a ruler. Saturday arrived hot and perfect. Not a cloud in the sky. I set up early, loading coolers with ice, firing up the grill, and carefully arranging the playlist. I programmed Alexa into her new custom party mode, which included Karen-triggered phrases turned into sound bites, now remixed into hilarious dance track. Every once in a while, Alexa would chime in with a robotic, "This is a community violation, just kidding. Welcome to the pool." I couldn't help but smile. By noon, the first wave of guests arrived, Linda, of course, with her binder nowhere in sight for once and a tray of homemade brownies that could probably get her arrested in at least 3 states. Then came Marty, the soft-spoken board member turned whistleblower, carrying a Bluetooth speaker and rocking a t-shirt that said, "HOAs hate me." The retirees who once feared Karen's clipboard showed up wearing matching pool floaty hat. Even the roller skating teen came by with her parents, grinning like she had just been allowed back into her own neighborhood for the first time. The pool shimmered in the sun, freshly cleaned, pH balanced to perfection, and totally poop-free. I had a new flamingo floaty, a deluxe one, bright pink with cup holders and a tiny Bluetooth speaker built into its neck. The grill smoked happily as burgers sizzled, kids shrieked with joy, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the air felt light, unburdened by passive-aggressive energy or surprise citations. Someone suggested we make the party an annual tradition. Another person shouted back, "Only if we call it the Freedom Float Fest." And the name stuck before anyone could object. As the party hit its stride, I took a moment to step back and take it all in. Laughter, splashing, music, the smell of charcoal and sunscreen. It was exactly what I'd hoped for when I moved into this place. It just took a little warfare and a small revolution to get here. I looked over and saw Linda lounging in a chair, sipping her suspiciously potent iced tea, and giving me a look that said, "Told you it'd be worth it." I nodded. Then the black SUV rolled in. It came up the street slowly, windows tinted, sleek and quiet, stopping just short of the driveway. Conversations dimmed slightly as people turned to look. For a half-second, I had the irrational thought that Karen had returned for one final showdown, maybe riding a giant HOA gavel like some suburban Valkyrie. But the driver's door opened, and out stepped a man in a suit. Not HOA. Too well dressed. Polished shoes, sharp sunglasses, clipboard in hand. His presence was somehow more confusing than alarming. Until he walked up, introduced himself with a smile, and said, "We saw the footage. I'm with a television production company. We'd like to talk to you about licensing rights." Apparently, the viral video of Karen's pool meltdown had done more than just humiliate her. It had sparked interest. Lots of it. Views in the millions. Reaction videos. Parodies. Memes. There was a particularly popular remix called "Karen in the Deep End" that turned her scream into an auto-tuned dubstep drop. The man explained that his company produced reality-adjacent prank shows and was launching a new series about neighborhood drama. They wanted my footage. They wanted me, actually, to consult on tech-based pranks. He even used the phrase revenge engineer, which made me spit my drink from laughing. The timing was surreal. Here I was, flipping burgers at a suburban revenge barbecue, and suddenly I was being offered a chance to turn my HOA nightmare into content. I didn't give an answer right away. I told him I'd think about it after the party. He respected that. Left a card. Said he'd be in touch. Then he stayed for a burger, danced a little, and got splashed by one of the floaty hat grandmas. It was oddly wholesome. As the sun dipped low, the party slowed into its golden hour phase. Kids wrapped in towels. Adults migrating to lawn chairs with drink. Alexa announced the time and asked if anyone needed sunscreen refills, which made people laugh again. It was peaceful, calm, exactly the opposite of every interaction I'd ever had with Karen. The pool glowed soft turquoise under the ambient lights, and I floated lazily on my flamingo throne, drink in hand, watching a few fireflies blink to life near the fence. Linda strolled over and said, "So, now that the HOA's been de-Karened, what's next? World domination?" I grinned. "Nah. I'm just going to enjoy the quiet." Just then, Alexa chimed in again. "Karen-free mode remains active. No threats detected. Relaxation, maximum." Everyone around me burst out laughing. Someone shouted, "Alexa's invited every year," and someone else offered to build a floaty just for her. We stayed out long after dark, the laughter softening into relaxed conversations, the grill finally cooling down, and the glow of solar garden lights wrapping the party in a gentle shimmer. People started packing up slowly, hugging, making plans to do it again next month. No HOA approval required. As I cleaned up, Linda helped me drag the trash bags to the curb. She paused at the fence and looked at the faint outline of where Karen had once spray-painted her war cry. "Funny," she said. "You can still kind of see it." I nodded. "Yeah, I'm leaving it. Not as a reminder of her. As a reminder of how far we've come." We stood there a while, in comfortable silence, until she patted my shoulder and went home. I stood alone in the yard, one last soda in hand, watching the pool cycle its nighttime light show. I didn't need the drones, the sirens, the zappers anymore. But I kept them. Not for revenge. For peace of mind. I leaned back in my chair, the night warm around me, the stars clear, and said the final line I'd been saving for just the right moment. "Alexa," I said. "Yes, master," she replied. "Sparkle Justice. Forever. Sparkle Justice mode activated. Enjoy your freedom, citizen." And with that, the pool lights burst into a colorful shimmer, the flamingo floated past like royalty, and somewhere, in the distance, a poodle probably barked in defeat.